Yeah, I would say one of the secret sauces that I will share with you, because it's easy to walk into our properties, and most would pick up on this. So when you would walk into our community and you would walk into our clubhouse, it's a great clubhouse, but it's not over the top. It's not over the top, not fancy chandeliers, but it's a great clubhouse. And our pools are really, really nice. They're resort style pools. But what I would prefer to do, Raj, is put the money into the units. So we have the best appliances. We have the best doors, the best tops, under cabinet lighting, soft close cabinets. So like when you walk into our units, I mean, it feels like you're walking into $1 million plus single family home. Like those quality standards are where we spend our money. So I would rather spend there because our residents are going to spend their most time in the units.
Tom, thanks for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Raj, thanks for having me.
You're the founder of Mia Rose Holdings, a company you started 10 years ago. Over the course of 10 years, you've had very rapid growth. You're a well-known name in St. Louis, but not a lot of folks know a lot about you or Mia Rose. And I don't know if that's by design or not. I think it is. You've built over 3,000 apartments, currently have under $1 billion, slightly under $1 billion assets under management. And you've done over 20 large-scale commercial projects. Speaking to you before this and previously, maybe about a month ago, it seems like you're extremely proud of making other people wealthy, people on your team, great culture you've created over there. And you're also a former professional hockey player. So this is going to be a very, very interesting conversation. Can you start with just kind of giving some background on where you grew up, how you grew up, and then maybe working your way into your first taste of real estate?
Yeah, Raj, thanks for having me. Really enjoy, getting to know you over the last couple of years and the conversations we've had. So we're in similar businesses, and just good to speak with you and good to be here. So, St. Louis born and raised. So born in Kirkwood. My father worked for Monsanto, so we kind of moved around the country. Born in Kirkwood, moved to New Orleans, Louisiana, moved to Dayton, Ohio, and then moved back to St. Louis in 8th grade. So went to Parkway West High School, played hockey growing up, started playing hockey when I was 10 years old. So it's certainly a sport that I have enjoyed tremendously, very passionate about it. My son now plays hockey. So growing up in St. Louis, a lot of the Blues alumni were retiring and staying in St. Louis. So that all of that ties into giving me an opportunity to play high level hockey in St. Louis. Ultimately got a full ride scholarship at Michigan Tech to play NCAA Division I hockey there. Had a great career there. That was fun up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And then ultimately ended up playing professional hockey in the East Coast League for two different teams, Arkansas, down in Little Rock, and then also Baton Rouge, Louisiana for the Kingfish, and then finished my career in the American League in Lowell, Massachusetts. So after the old hockey career, hung it up, got married my high school sweetheart, Sherry Kaiman, Sherry Hatfield then. We both went to Parkway West together. We've been together since we were 16 years old. So probably a relationship that I'm most proud of. Yeah, and then ultimately got my degree in civil engineering. And when I was done playing hockey, got a job with Walton Construction. And the first project was the St. Louis Blues practice facility. I still remember interviewing for the project, and I'm like, I know everything about hockey and ice rinks. And so it was a great fit. Dan Frisbee and Steve Biederman hired me kind of on the spot. It was great experience, learning how to build basically everything at that point in time. Ultimately moved on to SM Wilson, Scott Wilson, great guy. Got me to come over to the business back in 2010-ish. Was an incredible experience. But at the end of the day, read a book when I was 19 years old called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Richard Kiyosaki. And that entrepreneurial spirit was always with me. So I always felt I was destined to be an entrepreneur, run my own business. So as I'm adding up all the parts and the pieces and learning how to build and, learning how to build teams and learning how finances work and all that, ultimately culminated in 2015, starting, me at Rose. And, I owe a lot of people thanks along the way. There's many people that gave me bits of advice and encouragement. I call him Uncle Rudy. He's my dad's second cousin, Rudy Cortines. And Rudy always pushed me to be in real estate and own assets, hard assets. And I have another couple guys, Rob Kimball, one of my closest friends down in Arkansas, was always pushing me to get into the development side. He's like, you have the skill sets, you've got it, kid. You just gotta break away. You gotta go do your own thing. So, really appreciated their advice and guidance, throughout my career. So.
Just for context, what year was it, or what age were you when you started on that first blues practice facility?
Let's see. I was 23, 24 years old at that point in time.
Got it. And since then, I think you've built another hockey facility of some sort. Is that correct?
Well, I've ultimately been a part of 7 sheets of ice here in St. Louis.
Okay.
So, clearly with the hockey background, I'm very, very passionate about the sport. And so then helping the community to have more ice rinks in the area is something I have been passionate about and wanted to help with. So being able to use my, construction experience and then my knowledge of nonprofits and how that all works. But yeah, I would say, hands down, the project that I am most proud of in my entire career is the Maryville University Hockey Center, which is in Chesterfield, Missouri. 2 sheets of ice, home to the Chesterfield Falcons, home to Maryville University Hockey Club. So the rink that I grew up in was in Chesterfield. It's called the Hardy's Iceplex. And so I played junior there, junior A, which is where the colleges they come watch junior A teams to ultimately recruit you to go play Division I hockey. So I was very fortunate in my backyard, basically was a rink that I got to play in. So you can play juniors up until the age of 21. I played till I was 19, but ultimately where I'm going with this is because there was an ice rink and there was a junior A team in St. Louis, I didn't have to move away. So I was able to sleep in my own bed, still date my girlfriend, my high school girlfriend, all those good things, be around my family longer. Ultimately, I found out when my son turned 4 years old, Connor, he was totally into hockey. And so he started playing at the Hardy's Iceplex. And it was very clear that rink would be closing, just deferred maintenance. And you just kind of look around and you start to realize like the ownership group's not pouring money back into the facility. So just started asking a lot of questions with a lot of different people and realized it would be closing, and kind of took it amongst, put it on my own shoulders to say like, hey, look, this sport has given so much to me. The community has given so much to me that this needs to be my project of passion. So partnered with a couple really key guys, a guy you just interviewed, actually, Michael Steinberg. So, incredible human being. He and his right-hand guy, Tim Lowe, they were instrumental with the incentives that were needed, a transportation development district that you needed to get that project done. And then Kelly Chase. So Kelly Chase was another one of my partners. It was kind of the 3 of us. And I needed Kelly, the project needed Kelly to help fundraise, right? He's just an incredible human being. He knows how to hit on the heartstrings of others. And so ultimately, ice rinks are not very profitable. So you really need to set those structures up very uniquely with a nonprofit owned. So then you're not paying sales tax on construction materials, and you're also not paying property taxes in the future. So that creates a sustainable structure for ice rinks. Yeah. So then, ultimately got it done. It was a 5-year From the day we put the property under contract to the day we opened was 5 full years. So most people think real estate development is like just super sexy, super easy, like just slides right on through. Not a chance. So, but by far the project that I'm most proud of. So the community that came together, the vote that had to happen publicly, all the city, the zoning, the site entitlements, the site planning, the youth organizations that we had to bring together to ultimately make it happen. Big shout out to Mark Krause, Sheila Waddell, who were on the board of the Chesterfield Falcons. So they ended up becoming the owner operator. So we basically made them the owner of the nonprofit that would ultimately own that property and that asset. And then Michael, Kelly, and I became kind of the third party developers that were shaping up the deal, for them that were ultimately going to use the facility. So.
Got it. Before we go into multifamily, staying on the hockey topic. So I grew up in Canada. I'm more of a basketball guy than a hockey guy, but we played street hockey. We primarily played street hockey because we didn't have access to ice rinks. Growing up in the Toronto area, I'm assuming it's probably a similar situation as what you were describing in St. Louis, where maybe they're not profitable enough to exist, in the numbers you may need. So you made me think of an issue I didn't even know existed. Just not having enough ice rinks for kids who want to play hockey. And you mentioned, aside from the project in Chesterfield, 6 others that you helped develop in the St. Louis region. And where are those other ice rinks?
Yeah, the other ice rinks here in St. Louis. So there's 2 in St. Peters that the city of St. Peters owns. So it was involved in those 2. Also involved in the renovation of the Brentwood ice rink when I was at SM Wilson. Then we also built a new facility in Pacific, Missouri, and then the 2 rinks at Chesterfield. So, but yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think there's probably 25 to 30 sheets ice, here in St. Louis. There's 2 new sheets going in the Chesterfield Valley, just actually down the street from the Maryville University Hockey Center, that one of the other youth clubs, CarShield, is building. And I believe Keystone Construction is building it. But yeah, the rinks, they're extremely costly to build and they're extremely costly to operate. So if you're just going to build a warehouse with an indoor soccer field, an indoor whatever, the amount of energy and utilities to run that versus an ice rink constantly, it's 10x more to run a rink. And it's easily 5x more to build it and everything you have to do. So from a cost perspective, that's why there's just not as many rinks, versus all the other activities for youth sports. So it takes a unique structure typically to figure out how to how to make the numbers work. Because you don't want to build an ice rink and ultimately it fail because it can't pay debt or can't it's not sustainable enough. So when you look at the Maryville University Hockey Center, basically we were able to, with the Transportation Development District and the donations, put 50% of non-recourse funds that didn't have to be paid back, right? Like when you donate, you don't expect a return, right? You're donating to the facility and the nonprofit. So we only had 50% of debt. So that just made it hugely sustainable for generations to come. So, but to your point, yeah, ice rinks are tough. They're expensive. So the cost of entry and all that, it's just not, and to play the sport, I mean, you think of playing soccer, right? You need a pair of shoes, you need a pair of cleats, you need a ball, a pair of shorts, like, shin guards. It's not, maybe it's $100, $150, to play the sport. Hockey, shit. A pair of skates is $1,000, so it's really expensive to play the sport. And plus, like an hour of ice, it's $300 to $400 for an hour of ice. You go to Veta or some other indoor soccer, what's it cost to rent, an hour of a soccer field? It's not even close. Mm-hmm. So it's a different sport. The barriers to enter are just more costly compared to basketball, soccer, all the other indoor sports. So
your hockey background also kind of shaped or helped form the way you view business, team building, things like that. Can you speak on how you're bringing your background into construction and also building such a successful company?
Yeah, I would say the team first mentality and interest alignment. So on a hockey team, from the general manager to the coach to the players, the trainers, everybody, they're all aligned to the success of the end result. You don't always know how you're going to exactly get there. You're going to, try to have the best coach that you can, that's going to play the best systems. You're going to have the players that are all well-rounded and all play their roles, right? But ultimately, at the end of the day, at the end of the season, you're looking for whatever that success is for you. So I really approached the building of our company and the team members that are involved with that same mentality. So ultimately, I'm super addicted to a successful end result. And what I've also learned is that our team is the one that sets what success looks like. I mean, I don't have to look successful to you. I don't have to look successful to others. As long as what we feel as a team, these are the metrics we're going to measure ourselves and ultimately be successful. Now, don't get me wrong. There's accountability. There's accountability with the banks. There's accountability with your investors. But as long as we're communicating to them ultimately in our model and our vision of what success looks like, where we'll be high-fiving one another at the end, whatever the end may be, that's what we're focused on. So, we've grown the business. There's 10 of us that run the business. So to run the size business that we're operating in, we're very, very efficient. So we all wear lots of hats and we all absolutely grind harder than anybody else that I've ever seen. I'm 24/7, 365, dude. I don't take a day off. I don't take a night off. We're able to balance. My wife is incredible. She allows me to be me, which is awesome for our family. But, when I need to be there for the family, when I need to be at all the kids' sporting events, we're able to balance that. And so, we don't miss any of that. But, if it's Sunday night and it's 7:00 and the kids are all kind of winding down, dad's working, looking forward to the rest of the week, what's going to happen, what's the vision looks like, what are we planning for? But I guess back to the team, I really push that on all of them as well. Like, so we don't track vacation, and frankly, the way we're set up, we don't have any employees. So Mia Rose as an organization is all principal and partner led. Like all 10 of us, we're all partners in each of the deals. And we're only successful if the deal is successful. And so when I talk about interest alignment, to do that, when we bring a new family member into the team, like that's really important to understand. Like, if it's whenever you need to take vacation, you take care of your family, you do all those things, but like the business is balanced, and the success of each of the deals we do, the more successful that deal is, the more successful we as a team are, and the more successful you are as an individual. So it's really important for me that the rest of the team, that our team also becomes wealthy in the process, because we're working so hard, we're grinding so hard that, there needs to be, a financial windfall at the end of the day, for all of them. I think, myself and our family has done really well, but we're kind of beyond what's in it for us. We're really in for what's in it for the rest of the team. And our investors too, right? The investors, we need to make particular returns for them that when we say we're going to hit a number, you got to hit the number. Some things go well and some things don't go so well, but, at the end of the day, the results are really important to the investment team. So balancing returns for investors, but also, our team members internally at Mia Rose, like, how do they become millionaires and become wealthy to be able to retire, right? We don't have ESA, or we don't have 401k. We don't have, all those other benefits. So, our retirement is each deal that we do. So it's super, super important that, we've vetted each of the projects out, and ultimately we're gonna create success there.
That's really interesting. I haven't heard of too many companies that are set up that way, and it sounds like that's very unique and intentional. I've got to ask you though, how do you maintain your own level of motivation when, as you put it, you've done pretty well financially? What keeps you going and keeps you wanting to take the risks of real estate development and the pressure, of growing a company?
Yeah, I would say success is addicting. And I really enjoy successful results. So, it's hard to, well, it's not hard. It's you do a deal and you go full cycle on it, and it's 3, 4 years later, and you sell that baby. You pass it along to, the next generation, or the buyer, and you make millions of dollars. And I mean that that day is so exciting. The grind isn't as exciting. At first you get the project approved, you get it zoned, you get it planned, and you're able to raise money, and a bank actually says you will lend you money, and you're like, yay, awesome. But I'll tell you what, selling that asset or even distributing funds to your investment team, man, there's nothing like it. It's just like you're walking on water, right? I mean, it's just an incredible feeling. So I'm just addicted to that. And so I love making people happy by sending them funds. So yeah, I mean, and it doesn't matter, whether it's because Mia Rose, we're a development company, right? But we also have, another company called Lumen Holdings, and my partner Brad Swenson and I, we're the co-founders of Lumen Holdings, and it's just exciting. That entity is a long-term strategy, so we're acquiring assets. So that's super exciting, closing on a deal and knowing we're going to own it for, 7 to 10 years. And so, I'm not going to say I'm not a deal junkie, because we are pretty particular about things we get involved with, but ultimately, closing on deals and, just being successful financially in those deals is really, I don't think I'll ever retire, because I just like doing that so much. And ultimately the team, not only the team at Lumen, but the team at Mia Rose, like, they've all voted and spoken that they want this to go into perpetuity. At one point in time, Raj, I thought, I'll do this for 10 years, make enough money and retire. Like, that's what I thought. And I thought the rest of the team would have made millions of dollars all individually as well, and that they'd say, okay, good, we're ready to retire. But when we meet every week, but we typically have like a quarterly really get together. And so in 24, they spoke loud and clear and said, Tom, we want perpetuity. Like, we want to be able to, bring other family members into the business. We want to grow. We want to keep this thing going. And so, like, that totally renewed me to say, I'm addicted to deals and success. So I'm in. Let's just keep going.
You saying you're not a deal junkie but addicted to doing deals is very relatable for me. I feel the same way. Like, we're conservative with the offers we put out. We won't buy just anything. We have a very specific buy box, but I just love doing a deal more than anything. Do you celebrate it all? Because that's the problem I have is it, like, if we have a capital event, I don't celebrate them. I'm thinking about the next deal or how to keep moving the company forward. Are you similar in that regard?
We're very similar, and I'm terrible at celebrating. So we do try to celebrate as a team once a year, and we kind of, we hit on all the wins, typically around the Christmas break time. But yeah, I mean, we closed on a deal last Monday and distributed out the funds. Like, I'd tell you, our team, Mark Palazek, our CFO, Joyce Morgan, our director of finance. Raj, it's incredible. The money, the timing that money hits the bank, they have all the wires set out. They've done all the analysis. Like that money's not in the bank for more than a couple hours before it's already out to our investors. Like, which is, I think it's a little bit different. Not everybody operates like that, but we're so excited that, we've done the deal and we want the investors to get that cash as quick as possible. So it's just incredible. Like we do that every deal. Like the money doesn't sit in there longer than 4 hours. I don't know of anybody else that does that, but kind of back to your point of we need to improve at stepping back and saying, that was great. Let's go to dinner. Let's celebrate. But yeah, I mean, when you're in the grind, I mean, you probably have a deal flow. You probably are looking at 6 to 10 deals right now, right? I mean, it's constant. You're churning, like you're running a business. So it's like, yeah, we won, but the war's still going on, man. you won that battle, but there's a bigger picture here. We got to keep grinding, keep going. So, the way that Mia Rose is structured, we're structured to raise enough capital, place enough debt to do 4 deals a year. And by 4 deals, I'm talking about, between 40 and 50 million, a year. So we're doing, 160 to 200 million a year. And we've been doing that, consistently for at least the last 3 years. And we have 4 deals that will occur this year. So yeah, it's, maybe you celebrate, internally, and you're laying in bed and you're like, okay, that was cool. But it's hard not to think about what's next.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And my wife has told me I need to become better at celebrating as well. So maybe we can work on that together at some point. I do want to talk about how you view your developments. I don't know if the best way will be to speak about it generally, or if you have a specific deal we can dig into, but from A to Z, I think myself and anyone listening or watching would love to learn and hear about how you view real estate development, multifamily development, and how you make the big decisions, like in terms of what piece of ground you're going to buy, or even how you make the little decisions, like the finishes in an apartment unit. What level you're going to go for.
Yeah. So basically, you're asking me to share the secret sauce.
Yes.
So
you can leave some parts out. Well, the secret, I think, is the execution. Anyways,
yeah, I would say the secret, which I won't dwell on too much, is just our ability to ultimately deliver our project at a particular cost basis, which is different than most. So by different, I mean lower. So I won't really get into those details, but what I would talk about is, we're in 4 markets. So we're here in St. Louis, we're in Indianapolis, we're also in Northwest Arkansas, and we're in Dallas. So those are our 4 primary targets. Now, we've bought assets. We own real estate in Des Moines. We own real estate in Omaha, Kansas City. So we own in other markets, but I'll talk specifically about Mia Rose, where it's focused in those 4 markets are. Really, at the end of the day, or before the day even starts, you need to make sure the market you're going into is the right market for your business, right? So we want to know that, there's population uptick and trends on a positive nature, that the demographics, both income, median home values are solid in the markets that we're pursuing. So
and just to clarify, when you say market, are you talking about like a 1 mile, 3 mile radius of the site? Are you talking about the submarket? Like, how are you viewing those stats, and like how wide or narrow are you going?
Yeah, I think first you need to look at the submarket. So St. Charles County for us it's a big submarket, but if you look at the population trends, which we study constantly, 2010 to 2020, the census growth out there, was intense. I think the stat was 14.5% growth from 2010 to 2020. So a lot of people are like, well, why aren't you in core, St. Louis County and core? I'm like, the growth is happening out there. So we want to be in front of that growth. So first you'll study, that larger, trend. And then you'll start to dial in, what's the particular city that makes the most sense in. So then once you kind of vet out, I mean, we love a number of different cities, out in St. Charles County. To list a few would be Darden Prairie. We've had a lot of success there. St. Peter's has been awesome. Wentzville has been great. O'Fallon, Lake St. Louis. And I'm not interested in the other cities, but those are the ones that have kind of embraced, our vision. And that's also important. So, if a city's not going to embrace, multifamily and the value we bring with the quality of the product that we're bringing, and the quality of the residents that would be attracted to what we're doing, if the city's just not open to that, like, you just got to move on. Like, it doesn't make sense to try to push that rope uphill. Like, so ultimately you want to find good city partnerships that believe in what you're doing. So the good thing is we now have a track record. We've done 20 plus deals, so it's easy to point. But when you're first starting off, it's hard to convince someone that multifamily, in their city and at a premier site is the right thing to do versus some other type of development, commercial or whatever, whatever they think that should be. But ultimately, when you start locking into the city that you want to work with, finding a premier site is important. So, location, right? But if we're close enough to the premier site, that's fine too. You don't have to be the hard corners, for example, probably going to be more commercial, more retail, that kind of stuff. So, but you want to be in the mix. You want to, especially for your future residents, you want to make sure that they have access to not only the amenities that are in your development, but you want them to have the community amenities. Like, where's the local park, the trail systems, all those things that are very important to people that are living their lives. So, but ultimately, we start drilling down into the city, making sure that you've got the city support, making sure that you're able to find the ground. Not everybody's a seller, just because you see a vacant ground or an old home on something, that doesn't mean, somebody necessarily wants to sell. So ultimately having the skill sets to be able to, most of the stuff we buy is actually not for sale. So, I mean, you're knocking on doors and, you're trying to find that gem, that unicorn, that they don't even know that that's your vision, that needs to go there. 200 units, a mixed use concept. But ultimately, going full cycle, you have to be able to have the skill sets to be able to get something under contract. You have to have the city on board to, take you through the cycle of zoning and site planning, which typically in St. Louis is a year. From the day you put it under contract, takes a year to get all the approvals in place. But you also have to, you got to be running your financial models to understand what the rent structure is going to be, understand what your expense structure is going to be, and ultimately understand the capital that you're going to place and your debt you're going to put on it meet a particular return. So, and then for us, it typically takes 18 months to build. Our strike zone is new 3-story walk-up garden style product. The site may have a piece of retail or mixed use, but it has to have the cornerstone of the multifamily. And we like to do anywhere from 150 to 200 units. That's our strike zone. We like the walk-up garden style stuff. We are developing 4-story interior corridors with elevators on a couple different projects of ours, but the 3-story garden style is really, suburban, is really right down our strike zone. And ultimately what I think is really important in that whole process. So you find the right ground, you find the right investment team, you find the right debt partner, the city's the right partner, but ultimately you have to know what's your exit plan. And if you're building a product that is not attractive to a wide swath of future buyers, it's probably not a great thing to be doing. So I feel like the product that we provide and the markets that we provide it to, on the exit potential, there's a large group of buyers. So the from the size of the deal, like, we don't do 300 unit plus deals. We do 150 to 200. Like, that's That's it. And there's a bigger group of buyers for that size than there is for 300 to 400 unit deals. And then also from a basis perspective, I think providing what I can call affordable housing. And so that sometimes that gets a bad name, like affordable, that's low income. No, it's not. Affordable means that most of the people in the community can afford to live in your residence, in your complex. And I think that's very important. Like, to build product that, teachers, first responders, can afford in the marketplace. That's really important. It's important, not only to the community, but it's important to us to be a community member. I mean, anytime we deploy $50 million into a community, you better bet your ass, like we're aligned with the community. Like we want nothing but success. So, providing that rent structure on brand new Class A suburban that's still affordable. I mean, in my opinion, that's down the fairway, the biggest opportunity for a future exit. And the way that we structure our deals, we're going to develop it and build it as if we're going to hold it forever. It doesn't matter if our business plan says we're going to sell in 5 years or 3 years or whatever. Your business plan could be wrong. Like you may have to hold it for 6 or 7 years. Timing in real estate is critical. So for us to be able to predict exactly, 5 years from now that cap rates are going to be lower, that the treasuries are down, and we're going to maximize the sale, no one's that smart. So, you hope but you have to position the deal either way. So building it any differently is just not something we're interested. So the quality standards that we build to and we design to are consistent amongst all our properties in each of the markets that we build in.
In order to keep your deals little a affordable, not big A affordable, so just affordable to someone who's earning an average income in the area, are you building to like maybe an A- standard versus an A+ standard? And all I mean by that is, are you not putting in the fanciest kitchens? Are you not putting in the fanciest amenity spaces that maybe long-term operationally may cause higher expenses? How are you viewing those types of decisions?
Yeah, I would say one of the secret sauces that I will share with you, because it's easy to walk into our properties and most would pick up on this. So when you would walk into our community and you would walk into our clubhouse, it's a great clubhouse, but it's not over the top. It's not over the top, not fancy chandeliers, but it's a great clubhouse. And our pools are really, really nice. They're resort style pools. But what I would prefer to do, Raj, is put the money into the units. So we have the best appliances. We have the best doors, the best tops, under cabinet lighting, soft close cabinets. So like when you walk into our units, it feels like you're walking into $1 million plus single family home. Like those quality standards are where we spend our money. So I would rather spend there because our residents are going to spend their most time in the units. But I'm not downplaying like our clubhouses and our pools. They're great, but they're not over the top. So that's an investment strategy like I've been committed to, and I would find it difficult to weigh from that.
How did you develop your investment strategy and your thesis and just have it down to the formula you have it down to today? Like, I'm assuming, I could be wrong, your first apartment deal, you probably learned some stuff from, you made some iterations on the next one. Just how did that develop for you? For us, it was very organic, deal by deal. We narrowed our buy blocks and, strategically changed the way we do certain things. Is that how it worked out for you? Or
Yeah, we started buying our first, started Mia Rose in 2015, but we started buying properties, 2008 and kind of building up a portfolio of existing stuff. So whether it was buying single family homes and flipping them, Again, while I was working for somebody else, but, still had that entrepreneurial, hey, we want to do stuff on the side. And then also buying up, some property in South City, from 4 families to duplexes to 8 units. So really learned, how to manage, how to lease, those properties of existing assets. And ultimately, during that process, really learned that I wanted to be more of a visionary and create on the development side. So ultimately ended up selling all that off and then really poured everything into, the Mia Rose new development side. But, I would say, our first major development on the multifamily side was the Junction in Wentzville. So there's a hotel, 180 units that we built called Grand Central. My partner Jim built a Sugar Fire, Brett Hall's Junction House in F45, all part of one development. We had a pretty old, antiquated, I would say, pro forma and model. And then we've just improved from there, so we've grown up over the years. So, we've seen some other investor models and, some seen some institutional, seen some family office stuff, and just kind of morphed into what the perfect financial model is for us. And I think it's just continuous improvement. It's a continuous analysis of what the market needs, what the rent structure needs to be, debt structure. We've done a couple of deals 100% financed, you know, 2019, 2020, 2021. I won't do that anymore, but we did it and it was successful. But I mean, now most of our deal structures are about 30% equity, 70% debt. We've done a couple 25% equity, 75% debt. But then it's a constant. Like we're never going to get stuck on, hey, this is the exact model you always have to use, and we'll just continue to improve. So,
correct me if I'm wrong here, but Mia Rose is self-funding the land acquisition and, the architectural plans and moving through the approval process. And then when you're ready to build, you're getting a community bank or a regional bank that you have a relationship with to provide the debt. And then you're raising equity from investors. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. So all the pre-development costs, Mia Rose and, the internal partners there will fund all of that. So a typical deal from the time you put it under contract to the time you're actually ready to close, like I mentioned, is usually 12 months. I'm working on a project right now in Valley Park, Missouri, the old Wet Willie site at 141 and 44. We are 3 years into that deal. So we're like $1 million into that. So the way that Mia Rose operates is we put all of our capital at risk during all the pre-development. So we won't raise any investor money until the deal is totally done. Like we've raised all the equity, have the bank ready to close. So we, myself and our group will fund all of the pre-development. I would like to comment a couple other things that really set us apart. So I think a lot of developers do what I just mentioned. They take on all that risk in the pre-development, versus raising investor money. But also on the development side, myself, our families, and the Mia Rose General Partnership, all of our deals require recourse. So we sign on the bottom line. We put our balance sheets at risk on every deal. So I think that is very important. It shows investors that we're super focused. Like, there's not a chance I'm going to let a bank take one of our properties back or lose investor money. Like we're in it. And also what that allows, it shows everybody we have studied that opportunity so in depth that we're willing to put a balance sheet at risk. And it also gives us better terms, gives us, more leverage. Leverage is good and bad, but you need the appropriate leverage. But, and I also think from an interest rate perspective, we're negotiating, interest rates that I would say typically are sub market. Below market what everybody else is getting, but it's because, we're putting the balance sheet at risk and we have, strong partnership behind that. Another thing that we do is each of our deals, which is very typical, includes a development fee on a project. We do not pull the development fee out of our projects. We actually place that development fee behind the actual cash from the investors. So we make it subordinate to the actual cash. So ultimately, what that means is we're not doing projects for fees. So some developers, they get paid a $2 million fee, whether the project's successful or not. We only make money if the project is super successful. So by placing that subordinate development fee, the banks really like that too. Okay. But from an investor perspective, it's unique, and I think they really enjoy it as well. So, and speaking, to our investors, up until now, we've been running this for 10 years. We've raised about 200 million in capital, and it's basically through friends and family. So we really, up until this point, have not brought in, any institutional players, and have not really brought in any family office. It's just been, mostly through hockey connections, our friends and family. So, but I do think that will be changing. So, we're certainly raising more money than we ever have. It's a different market than it was 10 years ago. So costs are up, of course. Less leverage. So the amount of capital that you're raising, I mean, on average, 10 years ago, we were raising $5-6 million a deal. Now we're, 12 to 15 million a deal. So, at a certain point, and I think that'll be this year, where we'll be continuing with the friends and family raise, but we'll also, I don't think we'll go institutional, even though we've done 20 deals. But I think, opening that up to more family office, and I'd like to do that locally, versus going nationally. So I do envision that that's a change for us coming up. So.
Sure. And on that note, it's March 2025. This is going to be released in a couple of months. So just to put a timestamp on it, how are you viewing deals today? How are you getting deals done today? And then are you still able to build with, rising construction costs and things like that, to where you're hitting your pro forma rents and achieving, your projected exits? Can you speak on that at all from a developer's perspective?
Yeah, well, I will say something that would be very dangerous would be just modifying a spreadsheet to show a particular return and say, oh, let's do this. But again, back to the point I made, if I'm signing my balance sheet up, there's not a freaking chance I'm going to take a risk on a spreadsheet just to get a deal done. It's not worth it. So, our numbers still work. Sometimes they don't though. So we'll vet a site. We'll put, we'll get out the old spreadsheet and perform an analysis. And ultimately we'll say our cost, the yield and investor returns, and debt service coverage ratio is just not able to be hit. And, we pass on the project. So that happens. But on the projects, clearly that we're moving forward with, the way that we've structured the debt and the equity meet our thresholds from a return perspective. So, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes, even if it doesn't, then it requires some additional conversations with the city, your city partner. And you say, hey, I'd really like to get this done. But I mean, there's millions of dollars worth of retaining walls, and there's millions of dollars of extraordinary costs. And I got to put a signal in and a bridge and all these things. And because I have to do all those things, this doesn't work. Well, then you have to see if the city would be open to some type of, partnering relationship through incentives. You never go into a project saying, oh, I got to have incentives. Like some people might, we don't, and it'd be inappropriate. But if you get to a point where you still want to do the project, but something doesn't make sense and the city wants the project to happen, well, you need to partner and you need to figure that out. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, I think, new development, from an investor perspective, we communicate our limited partners, as long as a deal's looking in the 12 to 15% internal rate of return and a 1.5 to 2.0 equity multiple in a 5-year model, if the deal pencils to that, it's something we want to consider. And as long as it's, in the right municipality, in the right market, it's something we would move forward with. So, but it takes a while to get to that point, right? We've got to get something under contract, how much you paying for the ground. So we've, over the course of time, we know how much we can pay per unit in a municipality because we know about the rent that would be achieved. So, and we've got a lot of data now that kind of supports all of that. So I hope that answers the
Yeah,
question.
it does. And the fact that you mentioned, your basis being lower than some of your competition, perhaps, I'm sure that helps deals pencil as well. Because like when we're buying, a big thing we're looking for is how insulated are we from new construction? And if you're able to build at a lower cost than maybe another project down the street, and you can have the option of holding long term, I think you're essentially insulated from most of your risk right there.
Yeah, I totally agree with your approach. So, if you're able to buy an existing asset, at replacement value or below right now, I mean that's kind of what we're doing with Lumen. We would certainly entertain an opportunity to do that. So, but some guys say, "Hey, we're buying below replacement value," and then I ask, "Well, how many deals have you built?" "Oh, you haven't built any." "Oh, well, how do you know then?" Right? Like, so I think that's, because we're builders and developers and we're also long-term, have a long-term business strategy, feel we've kind of got that dialed in. Um, I guess that kind of gets me back to the point you bring up, the lower basis. So, we talked about the development fee being pledged and taking a subordinate position. We talked about, us signing on the recourse, but it's something that also really differentiate our team is we are builders. So, I was in the construction business for 15 plus years before, starting EROs, but, all of my partners were all builders first, just happened to figure out how to work the spreadsheets. So it's a little bit different. Many developers are like they're financial, they're real estate brokers first, and then they've learned how the financial model works, and then they kind of get into development. One of the reasons I started Mia Rose is because we were building for others, and I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, you know, I have all this figured out. 90% of the deal is what you can build it for. So if I already know that, why don't I take all that construction experience and deploy it into creating wealth? So the day that light bulb really went on for me, it was pretty interesting. So I still remember where I was sitting, and yeah.
I've heard through others that you're very involved in the construction process personally. So it's not something you delegate to, just anyone on your team. Not to say that other people on your team can't handle it or be hands-on. Is that accurate? Is it true that you're very hands-on with every construction project you guys have?
Yeah. Well, because I'm so involved in the front end, right? So like if I ultimately don't think we can build something for that particular price point, then we're wasting a lot of time. So I have to stay intensely involved in that process. And sometimes, we're setting the price point where I'm meeting with our contracting partners, and it's like, this is the number that works. Here's why it works. Here's why I know we can meet that number. Do you want to partner with us to build it for that number? And, some of the relationships that we have around town, the general contractors can't get to that number, and that's fine. They're accustomed to building, a particular product and just can't do it. What I learned early on in my construction career is if you did 2 projects and you paid X for flooring, let's say, for example, and on the next project you paid X plus 5%, you then mentally think that's the only price. It's X to X plus 5%. Well, what about X minus 20%? Just because you haven't done that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So then you have to find like who can think like that. Like sometimes you have to break the old mentality of like, well, that's what it costs. Well, that whole theory is, we take the approach of it doesn't cost that. And now we've built a portfolio that says you can build at X minus 20. And here's the 20 times that we've done it. And then we're trying to roll that forward. So it's interesting when you talk to new contracting partners, just how, how committed they are to that's what something costs. When other people, people are building less than us. I mean, I know 2 developers in town that they're self GCing everything and they're building for even less than we are. And that's super impressive. So I do think that'll be an evolution for us. Because we're all contractors, clearly you would think, well, why don't you just build for yourself, right? But when there's only 10 of us that are running the size business that we're running, we're focused on the development side and deal flow and the wealth creation through that versus necessarily running our own construction company. But I don't think we're going to start our own construction company. But I think there's some things in the works, there, which would more align us with, contracting partners and some things there. Same thing on the property management side of life. It's like, like I said, 2008 to 2013, we were buying up some multifamily assets, and I learned like I don't want to be the manager. I don't want to be the leasing group. So we third party all that out as well. So again, that we can focus on the development side, which is first and foremost. So
I think it makes a lot of sense to be really, really good at one or two things and let other professionals handle the rest. Because if you're really, really good at one or two things, which you guys definitely are, that's more than enough to have the competitive advantage to, generate wealth or generate returns that are outside of the norm. Quick question for you before we wrap up here. And if there's anything else you want to touch on, we can. Have you ever considered bringing or sourcing material directly from manufacturers or suppliers in like China, Vietnam, or other countries like that? I've heard of some folks looking into it, potentially doing it. And I think some of the challenges, aside from tariffs, which I'm sure you're sick of hearing about, some of the challenges are like you don't have the same consistency. You may not receive, exactly the type of product that you thought you were ordering and stuff like that. Have you ever looked into it?
yeah, we certainly looked into it in 21 when we saw the massive spikes in wood, for example. The wood index went from 350 per board foot to 1,700 in a 30-day period. And so, at that point in time, we started looking at direct sourcing wood. And at that point, once you're going to do wood, you might as well look at everything. So we have explored it, looked into it. At this point in time, there's a couple things that we source directly. Appliances, for example. So we take on that responsibility. It's easier for us to break out the site work from the vertical building. So a lot of times we'll hire the site work contractor versus having the general contractor hire that group. So that's not direct purchasing, but it's just more management, on our end. But yeah, I think our group would certainly have to expand from a resource perspective if we're going to start buying, cabinets direct and tops direct and things like that. We have explored relationships with Asia on light fixtures, and every time you go down that rabbit hole, you get really excited. You think you're going to save a lot of costs, but then the team is like, hey, Tom, I'm going to have to spend 40 hours a week, managing this. So like, who's going to do my job, right? So I do think direct purchasing, there's a lot of value there. So we just haven't really, we haven't wanted to direct our resources like we just mentioned. I'd rather be focused on the deal flow and the development side but when there's easy things like the appliances, site work contractor, things like that. But Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, everybody should be focused on how do you reduce your costs, right? Like, can you purchase something direct to cut out a couple middlemen? I mean, I think if you look at light fixtures, typically by the time, if you're buying it through a local electrician, there's probably 6 to 7 different markups, by the time it gets from Asia, over to the US, in the way that works. So, trying to figure out, which I think you know, we haven't cut out like all 6, but we've cut out 3. So we are buying our light fixtures in a particular strategy that ultimately drives the cost down, but we're not buying them direct.
Is there anything else about your strategy or upcoming projects that you think people should know about?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think people should know about our group. Like I mentioned, there's 10 of us that are running the business. We're executing a strategy that we're going to develop 4 new projects a year. We're in the markets, the 4 primary markets that we're in, and we're gonna stay focused on that. I think we'll ultimately go into a 5th and a 6th market. I would predict that would be in 26 and 27. We'll stay focused on the Midwest. We really like the Midwest, like to be able to drive 5-6 hours or an hour flight, something like that, to kind of get to where we need to go. But yeah, I mean, the continuum and the into perpetuity that we are now built for is just a continuance of what we're going to do on the development side. So I would think that from the outside looking in, just knowing that we're going to continue doing four deals a year in the size that we talked about, $40 to $50 million. And that's just, we're now, it's kind of on the flywheel, and we're going to keep going. And, constantly, like you mentioned about whether you're direct sourcing something or whatever, we're going to stay super focused on that low cost basis delivery, because ultimately that's just going to give us more flexibility in the future, whether you're selling it, whether you're having to keep it, whatever that looks like. If you build for a low basis, you sleep better at night, and you just know your whatever the future might look like, whether you're refinancing and sweeping equity out, or you're selling it and making, a pop, all those things will be more successful, just focused on that basis.
Thanks for sharing. I think it's a great strategy. I've seen your projects around town. I love to drive by and see, the cool stuff you guys have going on. You have a cool project going on this side of the river in Illinois. I've done deals with the same bank. They're excited about it. So you build a quality product. And as someone in the same space, not in development, but in the same space, I appreciate it for what it is. And even the little nuances of, you spending more on the unit interiors versus the common spaces, even though they're still very nice. I think that shows someone who puts a lot of thought into the little details. And if you're putting thought and effort into the little details, then the big things take care of themselves. So I appreciate the work you do, and I appreciate you taking the time to chat. So the last question I have for you is it's the hole-in-one, your greatest piece of advice that you could share with someone listening or watching that they can implement in either their business or their life. Do you have any wisdom you can share?
Yeah, I would say, some of the things that have changed for me in the last couple of years, and I'm not going to say I've had an epiphany, but I feel, you go through high school, and whether you go to college or not, whatever, but you're kind of in that learning and growing phase of your life. And then you get into experienced growth. And I feel like I kind of got trapped for 15, 20 years there, where I was in the experience growth mode, and I hadn't read a book in years, and I started reading about 2 years ago, and now I'm just absolutely addicted to, I'm not only addicted to successful outcomes, but I'm very addicted to reading and learning and constantly understanding what's going on in the market. So it doesn't matter what kind of book it is, whether it's a self-help or market strategies or about eating habits or whatever, but just your mind constantly going and constantly growing. So like now I feel like, I'm just constant, educational growth and knowledge base. So my big recommendation to all of our team members is just read. I mean, it seems so simple, but it will just open up your mind to so many different opportunities. And then the other thing that I have been super focused on the last couple of years is just about the money supply. So, we could go down a whole nother rabbit hole. If you want to have me back and talk about Bitcoin, happy to do that. So,
Sure.
so really understanding money flow, money supply, inflation hedging, which real estate is a huge hedge against inflation. So learning and growing in that and understanding, what's the Fed? Why is the Fed in place? How did it get in place? Understanding, income taxes and, 1913, we didn't pay income taxes. It was all, through tariffs, and that's how the government funded itself. So, understanding the history of the central banking system and how interest rates work. So those are like the two reading and then understanding money. I was, really confused for many years when people would say, the US dollar is not backed by gold. And I'm like, okay, well the 1971 Bretton Accord, it's like, okay, got it. Understand. But what is the dollar backed by? Like, and I never took the time to like really understand what is the dollar backed by and what's the real value, the store of money and the, how does that all work? Well, through reading, of course, I now really understand all of that, and feel really comfortable talking about it. And, just a quick little factoid. So, in March of 2020 through March of 22, the printing presses on the government side, do you know how much they printed and supplied into the system?
I've heard people reference it, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. So
yeah, I'll give you the number. It's 41%. So basically, the Fed introduced 41% more money into the system. And where does it go first, right? It goes into the central banking system, up top, and then filtrates into the bank system. And then ultimately guys like me or you and people borrow money before the inflation starts. And then as the money continues to trickle down, and now we understand, why the end user sees the result of what inflation has really occurred, because they're the last ones to receive the dollar. So 41%. So almost overnight in a 2-year period, your purchasing power, because the way the dollar system works, we supplied so much into the system, you basically lost 41%. Most Americans don't know that. Now, studying that, reading, learning, and better understanding like how to protect yourself and your family from the devaluation of the dollar. Now, I'm a big fan of the U.S., right? I want nothing but the U.S. success ultimately, as a global economy, and global country in the global economy. And so I'm I want the dollar to be strong, and it's still the strongest compared to any other nation. But when you look at that 41%, you're like, well, no kidding why inflation was rampant, right? So I think just, continuous education through reading and understanding the dollar and the monetary fiat system, and how why there is the craze of Bitcoin, and people are really exploring that. It's the two things that I would probably recommend to anybody.
thanks for sharing, Tom. I got 2 comments there. One, that was a very heavy hole-in-one, but I appreciate you sharing that. And then 2, a good friend of mine actually gave me a book this morning, 2 hours ago, called The Secrets of the Federal Reserve. I believe that's the name of the book. He just gave me a copy, so I'm going to be reading it based on him giving me the book, but also your comments. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ross. Thanks for having me.